Welcome to this presentation on caring for our whole self, our holy self. My name is Dan Pearson, and I am on the program planning team for the Catholic Information Center. The ministry of the center offers opportunities for deeper, more reflective awareness of the faith for those who are members of the Catholic Church. We also invite seekers from other faith traditions or no faith tradition at all to discover and dialogue with us about this way of life. We are a ministry of the Paulist Fathers in collaboration with the Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids. I'm happy to welcome tonight Father Ken Schmidt as our presenter this evening. I would also like to offer this reminder that the programs here at the Catholic Information Center are free and open to the public. We are donation-based, and so this evening would not be possible without your contribution and that of our friends and associates. Thank you. Your support and encouragement are indispensable. You can also connect with us for our free newsletter, watching videos on our YouTube channel, and following us on social media. Your help is a big part in everything we do. And you are welcome to visit us here at the center, where there is always fresh coffee in the lobby. Karen?
I'll start with the prayer. Come, Holy Spirit, come and do not delay. Bring your passionate love into my body, mind, and spirit. Do as Jesus promised and make your dwelling place within me. Blow, you mighty wind, burn, you purifying fire. Grant me the gifts of your healing and consolation, so I might be recreated. Come with your transforming power, so that I can stand strong in the honest truth of my own experience. Grant me the courage to give clear witness to your healing power, so that together we can renew the face of the earth.
Father Ken Schmidt is the advocate for priestly ministry and support for the Diocese of Kalamazoo. He is also a licensed professional counselor and co-founder of Trauma Recovery Program in the Diocese of Kalamazoo. For the past 20 years, he has worked with individuals and small groups of childhood trauma survivors and led training for mental health professionals, those who do canon law, formators for religious communities and congregations. He is co-founder and serves as clinical director of Trauma Recovery Associates. We're very pleased to have you here tonight, Father Ken. We know you have other engagements like the LA Congress a few weeks ago, which is like the big religious education conference in the United States. He has done work for training and formation of those who work with especially priests who have issues of addiction and alcoholism. You do much work, and you're coming back, I think, in June for a conference that's going to be held here in Grand Rapids for mental health professionals. Some of you may be interested also in his two books. You Have Set Us Free and Conscious Contact with God, which is Psalms for Addiction and Recovery. I'll pass them around. If you do not have access to Amazon, got to remember, show them up here. Here's the Conscious Contact with God, and You Have Set Us Free. If you do not have access to Amazon or the bookstore here, which has them on the first floor, but not open tonight, these two are my personal copies, but I have not marked them up. So I'd be willing to sell them at the regular price. I was thinking of upgrading the price at least $5 because I've asked Ken to sign them. So these are autographed books at regular price, but I'll pass them around. If you really can't get to Amazon or the bookstore, you can buy one of these from me. Thank you. Father Ken? Does he need this?
I have my own. So I am very glad to be here. I'm glad to have bodies in the room, and I'm glad for the people that are availing themselves of the great opportunity to join us on Zoom as well. So it's a great topic. I haven't talked about this topic before, so I actually had to make notes for myself to say, what is it that I'm really trying to do with this particular topic? So I'm going to start with some premises or some presumptions of where I'm starting from. All right. And I'm starting from a couple of things. One, I believe a person is a system. And what I mean by that is we're comprised of all these different facets that we talk about, but they all fit together in one system. So we're comprised of mind and body and spirit. That's a pretty common way of saying things. And we're also about thinking and feeling and behaving. That's also a way that we describe, and it's one that I frequently use. We're also comprised of what we would call our past and our present. All right. So we have part of who I am comes from my past, right? I didn't add future to that because I would argue that future is a fiction, that we all think we have a future, but none of us really know whether we have a future. But we do know that we have a past, and we do know that we have a present. So, second premise, if we are a system, then anything that happens in the system affects the whole system, which is a great premise because it means that no matter where we start, we're affecting the whole system. So as a counselor, it doesn't matter whether I start with how you think, with how you're behaving, or how you're feeling, because no matter what we address, it's going to affect the whole system. So it can be more effective for some people to start with the emotions. It can be more effective with other people to start with how they think, and be more effective to some people just to change their behavior. But no matter what we do, because we're a system, eventually it will impact the whole system. It also means that if there's harm, if there's abuse, or if there's neglect, it also affects the whole system. So it can't be compartmentalized that if I was traumatized, it only affects this, okay? It affects the whole system. It affects my thinking, my feeling, my behavior, my mind, my body, my spirit, right? It affects the whole thing. If I have even a benign change, no matter what I'm doing, it affects the whole system. I ate supper tonight, that affects the system. All right. So it's not just that it has to be something really big like trauma. Anything that we're doing affects the whole system. And anything positive that I do affects the whole system. So if we just step back for a second and I say, you know, I received an education, that affects the whole system. I have access to clean water, that affects the whole system. So it's really helpful to think of ourselves as a system, even though we can break it down into pieces and say, well, we're going to focus on my thinking, or we're going to focus on my mind, or whatever it is. Okay. Now, a little bit bigger picture. The system isn't just me as an individual, right? The system is my relationship with others, my relationship with myself, and my relationship with God, or for other people who are seekers, however they might describe it, a higher power, any power that I think of outside of myself, right? That's all a part of my system. So when I'm doing anything, it's not just affecting me, it's affecting relationship with others, and it's affecting relationship with God. And if any of those other things change, other people change that I have a relationship with, it affects me as well. Right? So it's very interlocking. I think this starts then to be a great argument, for example, to have good physical health, because good physical health isn't just a question of keeping myself alive a little bit longer, it's affecting my whole system. Good mental health and spirituality is affecting the whole system. It's a great argument then to say why we pray, why we relax, why we have counseling, why we belong to a spiritual community, why we have values. All of that is impacting the whole system, myself, and this whole system that I belong to. It's also a reason then when people say to me, well, why should I go to a counselor, right? Because the negativity, whatever that is affecting my whole system, right? It's not just my little thing that I preserve to myself and I say, well, this is my little problem. I just need to deal with it myself. My negativity, whatever is happening in me, is affecting everything. So you can argue the system isn't just about individuals, it's about neighborhoods, it's about communities, it's about schools, it's about workplaces, it's about our state, it's about our country, and it's about the whole world. Everything is interdependent. I don't know if you've ever heard of the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect, they actually worked out in some ways mathematically, and the basic thrust was that storms, major storms, are affected weeks before by the flapping of butterfly wings. Right? Now you think about that and you say, right? But what they discovered is that when they went back and they could do projections of how a storm would go, and you put in all the input of everything that you could figure out how a storm, something as small as the flapping of butterfly wings would impact the outcome of how the storm would go. Right? So just think about that in terms of system, right? Little things, big impact. Any questions or comments about my premises? Because that's what I'm starting from. Okay. All right. So here's my assertion. Here's kind of my thesis statement, right? My assertion, my thesis statement is this: the pandemic and the lockdowns. So that includes things like health policies, economic responses, mental health. The pandemic and the lockdowns are having a profound impact, not only on individuals, but on communities, on our parishes in the church, our country, and our world. They're all connected and they're all influencing one another. And so one of the things that I resist as a counselor is simple answers, simple explanations. You know, well, it's just this. And if we just did this, then the whole thing would fit. And I would say, if you take all my presumptions about how we're a system, there is no such thing as a simple answer. And I'm even almost to the point of arguing whether there's really cause and effect, in the sense of this causes this, or this happened and therefore this happened. And certainly we can see direct connections, but if you put the butterfly effect in there and then realize it could all turn out differently with some little system, some little change in the system that we don't even know about or aren't conscious of, it kind of argues against simple answers. So I resist simple answers. I'll give them to you. I will admit that. I will give you a simple answer. But inside, I'm going, it's much more complicated than that. All right. So that's the big picture. That's what I'm starting from. The whole system is interdependent. Everything is affecting everything. And therefore, this huge thing that we call the pandemic has affected the whole system in lots and lots of ways. And now I want to get into the specifics of some of the ways that's had an impact. My primary experience, which Dan alluded to, is that my therapeutic work is focused on working with adults who had trauma during their childhood. Okay. And so I'm coming out of that model. I'm coming out of a model that talks about and tries to explain what is the impact of trauma in childhood. And I'm going to use that then as a parallel to help us understand also what's happening in the pandemic. Okay. And then I'm going to go from that in each piece that I present. I'm going to have, depending on how much time I have, I'm going to talk about how it is in trauma, how it is in the pandemic, and then how it may be affecting our spirituality, our holy selves. So eventually I get to the topic. All right. In each one, right? You're wondering, weren't you? You were saying, when's he going to get to it? But this is the topic. All right. So the first concept that I'm going to talk about is called attachment ambivalence. It's a mouthful. You don't have to memorize it, but if you want to impress people, just drop it into the conversation one day and say, I was just talking to someone about attachment ambivalence the other day, and then you can really, impress them. All right. Attachment ambivalence is an understanding that when we're born, we need to be attached. When we're born, we need to have someone there who receives us and takes care of us because we cannot survive on our own. All right? Are you a mom? Okay, so you just given birth to the baby and they hand you the baby and they say, I'm sorry, ma'am, there's something wrong with your baby because it's not going to survive without you. I apologize, but that's the bad news for the day, right? You expect that baby needs you, right? The baby needs you for food, it needs you for safety, it needs you for shelter, it needs you to provide a home for it, it needs nurturance, it needs love, it needs all those things to survive. And without you or someone to receive that child and take care of that child's not going to survive. Okay, that's what we call attachment. We have to have attachment. All mammals need attachment. There's not something wrong with us. It's not a mental disease that you need attachment, right? It's just built in. That's what we need. We need attachment. At the same time, we're also designed for what I'm going to call detachment, which is that your body's designed to react and respond quickly when there's danger, when there's pain, when there's harm. Okay, so another mom, are you a mom? You're not a mom. Okay, you're a mom. All right, so I talk to you. You guys can't see her anyway, but all right. So you take your child one day and you take him into the kitchen and you take their hand and you put it on the stove and you say, when you feel that, that's called pain and you should take your hand off there because that's not good for you. Is that what happens? No, you would never do that. Why? And what would the body do? As you're taking your child's hand and heading towards the stove, what would that child's hand be doing? Pulling away, right? It's designed to pull away. It doesn't even have to touch the stove. The heat already is sending the signal to the body. This is dangerous. This is painful. Get away. That's detachment. So our body is designed both for attachment and detachment at the same time, and they're both survival tools, right? We have to be able, so if I'm living in the jungle and the elephant is chasing me, it's not to say, okay, I probably should do a decision tree and weigh the pros and cons of whether I should stand here or whether I should get out of here, right? The body says, run, right? It's a reptile mind, it's back here. It says, you got to do something and you got to do something right now. It doesn't stop to think about it, it just acts. So we're designed for attachment and detachment. Now, in trauma, in childhood trauma, you have a child that's caught in that predicament, which is I'm in this situation in which I need people to be attached to in order to survive. I need people to take care of me because I won't make it on my own. And at the same time, I'm in danger or I'm being hurt or I'm not safe. And so I want out. Now, they're not saying this consciously, right? But that's what's going on. They have this survival urge to attach, and at the same time, another survival urge to detach, all at the same time. Both of them, but they're telling them two different things, right? One saying stay, and the other one saying get out, right? And the best I can tell you out of my experience and the work of the last 20 years is that all children choose attachment. Okay, it's not a conscious choice, but it is the choice, right? They stay, right? Which helps us understand when we look at them or we say to them later, well, why did you stay? Why didn't you get out? Why didn't you tell somebody? Because remember, in their mind, it's survival, right? It wasn't like this decision, oh, you know, here's the pros, here's the cons. To survive, I got to stay. I got to have someone take care of me. I won't make it if I don't have it. So they stay attached. But what's left is there's still this urge to detach. It hasn't disappeared. Simply because I chose attachment, the detachment didn't go away. So what am I going to do with all this urge that says, I'm afraid, I'm getting hurt, I'm in pain, I'm angry, I'm confused, right? They learn not to feel. Right? Because all those feelings are so big and so overwhelming, and all of those feelings are still arguing with the attachment, right? It doesn't make any sense to say attachment. If I'm afraid, if I'm angry, if I'm being hurt, it makes no sense. So I gotta squelch all this part of feeling in order to be able to stay attached. So there's two dynamics that are going on for survival. Stay attached, don't feel. We're going to come back to the feeling part. We're going to stay with the attachment part right now, okay? Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Right? It's really a crucial, fundamental understanding for understanding trauma, right? It's not about blaming the children. Why didn't you? How come? Whatever. Because they're doing it for their own survival, right? They're choosing to stay attached, right? Now, here's the thing. So it would sound like what we should teach people is, well, don't get attached. We need that. We're built for relationship, first of all, right? Right? Hermits, if they're not psychologically healthy, they get mentally sick really fast, right? Because we're built for attachment. We're built for relationship. We're essentially social beings. We're not built to be alone, to not be attached. So we have to learn how to live with attachment ambivalence. With the fact that part of me says, stay, get close, have intimacy, be social. I want it. I desire it. And another part says, get out, don't get hurt, be careful. Now you understand how people get really messed up in relationships, right? Because you get burned one way or the other, and then whoo, then you swing, right? So it's really a spectrum. I'm just described it as if there were two decisions, that you attach or that you detach. That's not really a healthy way to look at it. It's a whole spectrum of how much do I stay attached and how close do I get and how much do I detach and how much do I stay away. And in every relationship, we're in a different place and we can shift. For any of you who have a significant relationship, think about the fact that as you're getting to know each other, let's start in junior high relationship. I just met the perfect girl, right? There is no one like her. No one understands what love is like except me, because I have just found the perfect relationship until she does something I don't like. And then we drop her like a hot potato because she's not perfect, right? That's the extremes. Perfect attachment, then we get detached, right? But if anybody has a significant relationship, you have to learn both parts of those in order to maintain the relationship. You have to learn that, let's say your spouse has things that you're really attracted to, that you really like, that you want them to keep doing, and there's this other part of them that you could just as well do without, right? You wish they just change it, but sooner or later, if you're going to be in a significant relationship, you're going to have to learn to accept some things that you just as soon detach from because they come with the package, right? And the other side of it is, so you can choose, every time you run into something, you can just say, drop that relationship, detach, be safe, right? But then you're not going to have any kind of attachment or intimacy in your life either. You have to learn how to do it. So let me give you a couple of examples to help understand that. Ambivalence is the key here, that we can have more than one feeling or one reaction to the same situation. I love my spouse and there's these things they do that just absolutely irritate me, and they're both true. My friend was really, really sick. I hated seeing her suffer with the illness, and she died. And I grieve her and I miss her, and I am relieved that she's dead and she's not suffering anymore. That's ambivalence. I literally had a conversation yesterday with a boy in 5th grade. His father died at Christmas time. And I said, how are you dealing with it? And he says, I cry sometimes. And I said, good. And he said, and I'm really sad that he's gone. And I'm really happy that he's not in pain anymore. That is so healthy. That is so healthy, because kids in general have the idea that they have to just pick one feeling and then shove all the rest aside because they can't handle the complexity. So for him to say practically in the same sentence, I really miss him, I'm sad he's gone, and I'm happy not to see him suffering anymore, was really a good sign for his grieving process. Think about your best friend that you talk to all the time and have coffee with twice a week, and they just announced that they got the perfect job. They love this job and they're moving to California. Right? That's ambivalence, right? You are thrilled for them. This is so exciting. It's exactly what they want. They've wanted this for so long. You are so happy and you are so sad that your friend is moving and things aren't going to be the same. Whether you have phone calls or you have Zoom, it's not going to be the same. And so you have this whole mix of feelings. And if we only pick one, it's totally confusing, right? So if I pick one, if I only act out of the happiness, then it's, oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm so happy for you. This is great. When are you moving? I'll help you pack. Can't you go earlier? I mean, this is such a great opportunity for you. We should get you out there as soon as possible. I'll help you to move, all right? And the friend is going, are they going to miss me? It sounds like they can't wait for me to get out of the door, right? On the other hand, if it's like, oh my God, how can you do this to me? How can you abandon me? How can you leave? We've been best friends for so long. How can you move away? You should stay here. Forget that job. Then there's like, there's no happiness for me. They don't see my excitement, right? We have to live in the ambivalence, which is I'm really happy for you and I'm really sad that my friend is moving away because I know that it's not going to be the same. The key word for ambivalence, and I say personally, the key word in therapy is the word and. To handle the ambivalence, to handle complexity, to handle attachment and detachment, use the word and. I'm happy and I'm sad. I'm grieving and I'm thrilled, et cetera, et cetera. Parents, last example. Your child, your teenager has a curfew of 11 p.m. and it's 3 a.m. in the morning and they haven't come home, they haven't called, and they haven't texted. And then they walk in the door pretty much like nothing has happened, right? You got ambivalence right then? I would suggest that it would include anger, absolute ecstasy that they're okay. You're really glad that they're not hurt because now you can kill them, right? So but that's ambivalence, right? And if we only live out of one side or the other, there's either the, oh my God, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so glad that you're safe. Let's go into the kitchen now, make your favorite pancakes and we'll sit down and we'll talk about the evening. And we just totally ignored the 4 hours of hell that you've lived through and the fact that they've broken curfew. Or the other side, we totally act out of the anger. And it's like, you know what? You're so lucky that I don't have a gun right now because that you're healthy. I would shoot you and get up to your room and you're never driving the car again. And you're grounded for 35 years. And right, we totally live. We have to manage the ambivalence, which is where do we find the way of being glad that they're okay and taking responsibility for their behavior, which was to break curfew. How do I manage that? My colleague Sharon used to give this example and her concluding example, because I wasn't a parent, was you should go to your room now before I hurt you. And tomorrow we're going to talk about this because we're not done, right? Going to bed tonight does not mean it's over and you got away with it. So in trauma, and in adulthood, we have to learn how to manage ambivalence. We have to learn how to live with complexity and nuance, which fits system, right? System can't be an easy answer. Ambivalence says the same thing. There has to be a way to have multiple feelings, to nuance things, to get out of black and white thinking. Let's switch it to pandemic now. How are we doing for time? 8:30, right, is what we're going for. Yes, okay. Pandemic. So what I heard is a search for easy answers. We're just going to find something that explains this. We're just going to find the one thing that fixes it all. We'll just find the one way to address it. And then everybody can do that all over the world and it will all be better and it will all go away, right? One of the things that I hear is the frustration that things keep changing. So, you know, we have this rule and then we don't have this rule. And then you can wear a mask and then you can wear a mask on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then you can wear a mask, but, you know, only covering your chin. And then you can wear a mask, but it has to be a certain kind of mask. And, you know, just tell me what to do is kind of what, you know, I just want the answer. Tell me what to do. And then I'll do that. But the facts keep changing. And so we're constantly adjusting. And if we like things to be black and white, this constantly adjusting is very frustrating for people, right? And then it has all kinds of responses for itself. This I'm going to go back in history. Vietnam War. So should we be in the war? Should we not be in the war? And one of the black and white answers was, my country, love it or leave it. Like, we pose these two options. Either you totally go along with everything that your country does, or get out, right? But that's black and white thinking. It doesn't usually serve us well. Doesn't usually serve us well. As a confessor, as you know, in the sacrament of reconciliation, when I've known someone for a while and they show black and white thinking, and it's frequently a pattern for people who have black and white thinking. I'm almost sadistic. So I say, you have a penance in mind? And they say, no. And I said, I have an idea. And they go, okay. And I said, I want you to go to a paint store, and I want you to get those little cards that have paint chips on them. And I want you to get a bunch of cards that have different shades of gray. And I want you to leave them around the house. And they say, that's it? I said, yeah, but it's going to be a lot harder than you think. Why? And I said, because you're going to get reminded all day long that there's gray and not just black and white. Personal experience. When I was going to school, I was living in Canada. I had a dinner party for a group of priests. This was long before I had any background in counseling, so I didn't even know what black and white thinking was. But we're having this conversation, and this priest, I gave an answer, and I said, that just seems like too easy an answer to me. I just think that there's a lot of gray in the situation, right? It's not that simple. And this priest, I'm not going to do it, but yelled at the top of his voice at me and said, that is exactly the kind of thinking that I'm talking about. And the Catholic Church is not going to be safe until people like you are dead and buried. So some people don't like black and white thinking, right? Or like black and white thinking and don't like gray thinking. They did not like my gray thinking. Okay. Third level then, spirituality then. When I do retreats, I talk about attachment ambivalence, and where does it show up in your relationship with God? When I talk with people individually about this, it's something like this, usually. Well, I really want God in my life, but not right now. I really want God in my life, except in this area over here. You know, I will pray for God's will, and I will do God's will, except if he asks me about this, because I'm not changing this, right? That's ambivalence, right? I want him, I don't want him. I want him close, but not too close. I want him right now, well, but not yet, you know? I want to change, but don't make me change yet. Still got some sinning I got left to get out of my system, and then I'll be ready to change, right? Right? So I just find understanding ambivalence, or whatever word that you want to give to it, a very, very helpful concept to look at lots and lots of things, especially when we look for simple answers, when I resist simple answers because we're really part of very complex systems. So any comments about that? You getting anything from the audience?
Well, you can certainly invite people to.
If they have questions or comment or something?
Raise their hand.
Okay. Well, I won't know. You'll know. Okay.
I
So you're invited to, I'm looking the wrong place again. You're invited to raise your hands or make comments or ask questions, and Mark will pass them on to me.
So anyone here in the room, comments, questions?
Clear so far? Because if I leave you muddy, it doesn't do good. I've already heard this before. So it's only if it helps you to understand that we accomplish anything this evening. So.
And for our folks online, any questions or comments?
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier that if we're picking attachment, oversimplified, if we're picking attachment and then we're trying to cover up detachment, the way to do that is to avoid feelings. So that's going to be the next unit. Okay. I'm just trying to connect one to the other. Avoiding feelings. And we're going to have a little call out exercise, and this includes the people at home. who are in their pajamas already, probably and drinking coffee, and that's great. I want to make a list of ways or things that people do to avoid feelings, with one caveat, that just because someone says it, we're not going to think that they do it. All right, because we get a much better list that way. All right, so we're just going to say that if you say it, you've heard of someone who does it, or your imagination says that people might do that, but we get a better list. All right, than anybody that starts thinking, you know, oh, she does that. I didn't know that about her. So, all right, so I'm like going for like 30. All right, drinking. Yep. Overeating. And here's an amazing thing to those of us like me who overeat. There are some people who do the opposite. They undereat, which confuses the overeaters. Video games, yes.
Facebook.
Facebook. TV. Streaming. Sleeping. Mark, you can just call out anything that they put in chat room, okay?
Yep.
They're probably the ones that got the really good ones. So we're waiting to hear from them. Okay, that's not 30 yet, folks.
Compulsive behavior.
Yes. So I'm going to just put OCD, obsessive compulsive behavior. Yes.
Shouldn't that be alphabetized?
Yes, it should be. It should be CDO.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I'm going to put it on shopping.
Oh, substance abuse.
Any kind of substance abuse. Yes.
Isolating, withdrawing
Mm-hmm.
was shared in the chat.
Isolation, withdrawal. Yes. I'm counting that as one, though, not two.
Self-harm.
Self-harm. So self-harm would include things like burning myself, pulling out my hair, cutting myself, those kinds of things. Biting my nails.
Overworking.
Overwork.
Keeping busy.
Mm-hmm. Busyness. Hoarding. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Rachel shares lying and manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Lying, manipulation.
I think that's when people use the word fine, right? I'm fine.
I'm fine. Okay, so let's get into sex. Okay, so we got sex, you got pornography, sexting, masturbation. See, now I said it all, so then you can sit there and wonder, well, now you know why we have the rule, right? I said I was at the Los Angeles Religious Conference, right? So I have like 150 people in the room, and I'm walking up and down the main aisle and working the crowd and whatever. And I said, no one has mentioned sex yet. And this woman, who's about 3 rows behind me at that point, says, I've been trying to say that, but I thought you were ignoring me. And I came down and I said, so it's the lady right here in the pink and the gray flannel shirt who said sex, but we're not going to assume anything about her. Okay. Humor, yes. Mm-hmm. Sarcasm. How about prayer? About any kind of hobby that just goes to an extreme. Right? Denial. Impulsivity. Think about impulsivity. I'll do anything at the moment to get out of how I'm feeling right now, right? I'm not going to think it through. Think teenagers, right? You say to the teenager, what were you thinking? They weren't. At that moment, they weren't. They were just trying to get out of the feeling, right? The other side of impulsivity is procrastination, right? I don't want to deal with that because of how it makes me feel or how it's going to make me feel. Then I'm going to throw up a couple of them. I'm going to put up rage, and I'm going to put up depression, anxiety.
Now, could you say a little bit of, because those can be feelings.
Yes, thank you. Usually I just get away with that and slide right by. So it looks like, well, wait a minute, you just contradicted yourself because you said avoiding feelings and these are feelings. Yes. It is not uncommon. I'm not saying always. I'm saying it's not uncommon that people will use one feeling to avoid the other one. So think about a spectrum or a continuum in which the two extremes are rage for anger and depression for sadness. And I know that there's other sources of depression as well, all right? But so it's a sadness, anger spectrum. And in order to avoid anger, they will show sadness. And I'm going to tell you this because this is an example I hear from women very frequently. Like they go in to talk to the boss and they're very angry, and then they're totally frustrated at themselves because they're crying while they're talking to their boss. Even though they're not sad, they're angry, right? Because the sadness mitigates the intensity of the anger. And then they get mad at themselves because that's happening, right? But the other side of it is depression happens when I'm using my energy to avoid my anger, right? But the other side of it is I can also use my anger to cover up my sadness, because sadness makes me feel weak. It makes me feel vulnerable. And I feel a lot more power when I'm angry than I do when I'm sad, right? And so some people, it's a learned response. I was working with a client in my office, and she was a person who used anger to avoid the sadness. She didn't want to get sad. And this particular day, she's moving in that direction. She's getting quieter. She's talking softer. She's talking more slowly. Her face is softening, and I can actually see that there's water sitting right there on the brink. And I'm saying to myself, this is the day. You know, I didn't think I was going to get sobbing, but I thought I might get some tears. And it's just like, this is the day. She's going to do it. She's going to do it. And then she got really mad at me.
Oh, right to the edge.
Right to the edge. But do you see how effective that is? When you're sad, and then you get angry, just knocks the old sadness right out of the room, doesn't it? Right? Very effective. Very effective. So yes, these can be used that way. So
Anger was a secondary emotion.
Yep. It's a means to an end, right? It's a tool. These are all tools that people use to avoid their feelings. And it's helpful to know what our own are so that we recognize when we're doing, maybe there's something else going on, right? Maybe I don't really need to eat right now. Maybe I need to sit down and deal with whatever I'm feeling right now. Because while I'm standing in front of my refrigerator at 11 o'clock at night, it's not because I'm hungry. It's because I'm stuffing some feelings. Right?
So eating.
Overeating, yes. Yes. Okay. And there's more. There's flashbacks. There's some things that occur with trauma survivors, like flashbacks. But anyway, that gives us idea. So think about when they're in the trauma, when they're caught in this dilemma between attachment and detachment, when they're just caught in the situation itself, right? I'm being hurt. It makes no sense that someone who says that they love me is hurting me. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with the fact that I'm in the situation that's just totally causing me confusion, and I'm angry and I'm afraid and I hate them and all this stuff is there, and I'm just a little person. And it's just overwhelming. And the only way I can survive is to figure out how not to feel all that so that I can stay, right? So that I can survive, right? So the best way is to ignore them or cover them up. The dilemma is for the child who has what we call magical thinking, it's like the feelings go away. That's what they say. You know, when I do this, when I have a brownie, then my feelings go away. Well, they don't really go away. That's the problem. They don't really go away. Either they get pushed in or they leak out in other ways. They leak out in our behavior because we're a system, right? So the feeling doesn't necessarily come out, but the behavior comes out, right? I'm not angry at my spouse, but every morning when I make breakfast, I burn the toast, right? I didn't even notice that I was burning the toast, but it does make me happy every day that I burn the toast, right? So it's not really, I'm not showing any anger. I'm just as peaceful as can be while I'm serving him the burnt piece of toast, but it leaks out in the behavior, right? So, and the dilemma is when the feelings get pushed in over time, that causes health problems. So there's a high correlation with autoimmune disorders, with heart disease, with gastrointestinal problems, with allergic reactions, with hypertension, all that kind of stuff, migraine headaches, high correlation with trauma and with avoiding feelings. If some of you have heard of ACEs, I'm not going to go into that, but if some of you have heard of ACEs, that's what that's all about, right? Public health discovered, whoa, there's a correlation between all this stuff that's going on with trauma and all these public health issues that we're dealing with. And we got it out of the realm of mental health, like you're just crazy, and saying, no, it causes physical problems, right? Over time, trauma survivors kind of abnormally age because of what they're doing to their systems. Think about, you know, the tiger's in the room. I got to fight for my life. My body's designed to do that. But think of like the adrenaline that goes on and the heart rate goes up and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's great if, you know, that happens once a lifetime or, you know, once a month or something like that. But think if you're having that kind of reaction several times a day, what that's doing to your body. Yes.
Accumulative toxic stress can cause you genetically to change over generation.
Yes. So if you couldn't hear that, acute toxic stress can cause generational change. Yes. We know that the impact of trauma now can have genetic effects, right? It can get passed from generation to generation, right? So that's system though, isn't it? Not a surprise. It's affecting the whole body, even to the cellular level. So they don't get acted out, or they get held down. I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to feel that. And then when it comes, it's like the volcano, right? Isn't that the way you usually read it in the paper? Oh, he was the nicest, calm neighbor. I never saw anything. And then one day they go ballistic, right? Repress, just like the volcano. It's all building up. It's all building up. And they don't have any way to maintain it. And so when it finally comes out, it comes out really big. So think about another spectrum here. Am I still on? Yes. It's a little harder to see. 0 to 10 in terms of intensity of feelings is the spectrum. Okay. Here I got nothing. Here I'm numb. All right. And here it's as extreme as it can get. All right. The experience for trauma survivors is live here as much as possible. Don't feel, right? But their experience of feeling is usually here. This is big. This is overwhelming. It's really intense. It's really, really uncomfortable. So what am I going to do to get out of this? I'm going to get back here as soon as I can. This is where they want to live because their experience of feeling is here. And I say to them, do you know that there's a range of intensity of feelings of 1 through 9, between 0 and 10? And they really look at me like, what planet did I just fly in from? Because it's not their experience. Their experience isn't that there's a range of intensity of emotions. Their experience is there's nothing or it's huge. And if that's your only experience, then it makes sense that you're going to want to avoid that and you're going to try to get out of it as soon as you can. So overall, The goal is to increase their skills to help them name their feelings, feel their feelings, manage the feelings, integrate it into the system so that they know that their feelings are also affecting their thinking and their behavior. They don't just exist on their own. That's a lot. I mean, that takes a long time to teach that and to develop the skills to be able to do that. But sometimes it's as simple in the beginning as naming it, because they're not used to it, right? They've spent their life's energy trying to avoid it. So I'm in a group one day and a woman kind of interrupts. She, it's like, yes. And she says, something's going on. Something's the matter. And I said, tell me what you're experiencing. And she says, I don't know. It's just, my body feels really weird. And I said, can I tell you what I see? And she said, okay. And I said, I see that your face is very soft. I see that your eyes are kind of drooping. I see that there's water running down your face. And you can see her kind of like checking in and yeah. And I said, and maybe you're also feeling like your throat is really tight right now. And I said, maybe you even feel like you have something really heavy, like a big rock in the pit of your stomach. I'm practically a magician at this point, right? And I said, that's what we call sadness. She says, I've heard people talk about it, but I never knew what it was. Right? So she was so out of touch with her feelings that she was unaware. She may have been sad before, but she had no way to identify it, no way to connect her experience to what people were talking about, that this thing called sadness and what it does. And of course, what we want to learn to do is recognize the cues in our body. If I say, I'm fine, I'm not mad at Mark. What makes you think I'm mad at Mark? I like Mark a lot. We have a great relationship, right? My body is saying something different than my words are, right? And we have to learn to pay attention to our cues. I'm not anxious right now. I'm not anxious right now. I'm not anxious right now. Why do you think that I'm anxious right now? We have to learn to pay attention to those things. And when we're not used to that, and when our goal is basically to keep all that feeling stuff away, it's a lot of work. Play it to the pandemic now. The pandemic has aroused a lot of intense feelings. And if we're not used to that, if we don't know how to manage that or name that, if we don't know from our own life experience what to do with big, intense feelings, this has been a really hard 2 years, hasn't it? I mean, it's hard even when you know how to do that. So if you don't know how to do that, and if you're a trauma survivor from childhood and you haven't learned how to do it, now you just have this whole huge extra load that has been laid on top of what you already don't know how to manage, and you just got more of it. And probably what you did, because it's habit and it's extensional, is to go back to however you're managing avoiding your feelings from the past, and you just keep doing it now, only bigger and harder and more often, because you don't know what else to do. These are your survival skills, right? We have to honor this because, first of all, it helped them stay alive, all right? They were in danger, they were being harmed, they were being neglected, they were being abused, and whatever they figured out helped them to stay alive. We have to honor that. And, like that word, and help them to see that what helped them to survive them is also causing problems for them now, right? The same thing, because they're not in the same situation. They're not in the same danger in the moment that they were in the past. So using that behavior doesn't necessarily help them anymore, right? But it's really hard to give up your survival skills, right? Now, Mark brought me in partly because I'm the expert from out of town, right? So I want to tell you all now that I'm going to give you a secret that most people don't know, but you can trust me because I am the expert from out of town, okay? You don't need to eat, okay? The grocery store industry and all the farmers, they want you to think that you have to eat in order to survive, but you don't. So just stop doing it, okay? Just stop eating. It's not necessary. You're going to save a lot of money. You're going to save a lot of time, all right? You don't need to eat. You think you have to eat in order to survive, but you don't. Now, you're all looking at me, right? But inside, you're going, He's a whack job. I wondered why they brought in this guy. What's Mark got against us, right? This guy's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about because I know I need to eat in order to survive. That's what you're saying, right? And that's what trauma survivors are saying. I need to do these things in order to survive. Don't take them away from me. So I'm the therapist and saying, that's not really healthy. That's not really helping. And inside they're going, you're a whack job and you don't really understand because I know what helped me to survive. I know what got me here. And you're going to try to tell me that that's not good for me and you're going to take that away. You don't know what you're talking about. And we got to understand that about them. It's why they don't immediately get all excited that we have a trauma program and come rushing towards us. Because you're going to make me talk about feelings, which I'm trying to avoid, and you're going to try to get me to change the things that help me to survive. That doesn't sound really attractive, does it? And then trying to tell me that I'm going to be better because of that, it's not convincing. Right? So, pandemic, lots of intense feelings. What does that lead to? It leads to acting out in all kinds of ways, right? Here's the dilemma. I can't take this list. I can't pass it out to you and say, here's the list of unhealthy behaviors. So stop doing all these things and then you'll be fine. Because it's not a list of unhealthy behaviors. A couple of them are self-harm, right? But sleeping, shopping, right? Praying, where's prayer? Having hobbies, those are perfectly natural and can be healthy things, right? It's the purpose that I use them for that can make them unhealthy. Eating when I'm hungry and I need nurturance, that's fine. Eating so that I don't feel sad every night. I lived with someone who ate, are you ready for this? A half a gallon of ice cream every night. That's a lot of calories. No, they worked it off. It was amazing. Truthfully, it is amazing, but they worked it off. But wow, but think about that, right? So it's not that I can't just say, don't do these things. I can say, watch when you're doing them. If it has a kind of a driven quality to it, like I have to do this, I don't know if I'll survive if I don't do this. If someone says, quit doing this, how do I respond? Right? If I say, there's no way I'm going to quit doing that, then there might be more of an issue there than you think. The very resistance to the idea of quitting it might suggest that there's a problem. Not automatically, but it can suggest it. It's worth investigating. Pandemic, lots of stuffing of feelings, right? We've tried to socialize. I would also argue that it's gone the opposite direction in some ways, which is we're just letting anything out that comes out. We've lost some of our social skills. We lost some of our simply being polite to be polite and swallowing a little bit. And I'm not in the habit of promoting swallowing our feelings, but sometimes there's just appropriate times and places to say something. Or even to say it in a way that's more socially acceptable and polite than this being recorded, so I'm not going to say. Another way that it's leaking out in an extreme is demonizing people. So we find we land on someone or some group of people, and that's the bad one. So it can be the president, it can be Dr. Fauci, it can be the Chinese, it can be monkeys. I mean, you know, but looking around for someone to blame, to demonize, to make into the bad person, because it's a simple answer. Why are we in this predicament? It's because of that or her or whatever it is. So this whole avoiding feelings, it's getting acted out right in front of us all the time. In spirituality, third place, spirituality. 1, prayer with no feelings. You know, I think this is very Catholic. We're generally taught very rational kind of praying, right? And I'm going back to generational more than now, right? You memorize prayers, it has content, you do it right. You say the right words, you do it this number of times. It's very rational. We were not taught, at least I certainly wasn't taught when I talk to people, we were not taught to pray with our feelings. Now compare that to St. Ignatius, who says you start with the feelings. When you go into prayer and you don't know what to pray about, start with your feelings. Well, that's about the exact opposite of the way I was raised. right? Start with your feelings. Start with talking about God, about what you're feeling, right? And when we use prayer as the means to avoid the feeling, okay? Now, these words can mean two different things. Go pray about it, right? That could be a really great answer. You need to go pray about that. It could also be the way to avoid, right? I'm not going to deal with the situation. I'm totally angry at you right now and we need to talk about it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go pray about it, right? And it's fine if I go pray about it to prepare having the conversation with you. But if I'm going to pray about it so that I don't have to deal with this, that's a whole different thing. That's the avoidance part. Okay. So that was the second kind of trait that we're going to talk about. First one was attachment and ambivalence. Second one is avoiding feelings. Any questions, responses, anything from chat room?
Mindy resonated with what you were saying about the body cues. The body is the messenger.
Yes.
Was her.
Yes, if you like that idea, in terms of trauma, Bessel van der Klok has a book. Oh, I just had the title and now it's gone.
The body keeps the score.
Thank you. The body keeps the score. Thank you. The body keeps the score. And really, really well done book that talks about how trauma influences the body. Yeah. Thank you.
And that circles back to what Marjorie was sharing about the generational.
Yes.
And I wondered, it struck me like, so is that the origin of the family curse? Like our family was cursed and it tracks back to someone having a traumatic event. I wonder.
It could be. I also hear in that the possibility of magical thinking, like I'm looking for a simple explanation of why all this has gone on because of, this happened to Uncle Joe. So, but I'll tell you where I first ratified it in my own experience, which was I was teaching in Rwanda. Rwanda had the genocide. Actually, most people don't know it. Rwanda has actually had a series of genocides, but the one that we call the genocide is a more recent one, right? We were teaching in Rwanda. We were teaching some mental health professionals, hospital administrators, social workers. We were teaching them, and this was early in the day, and we're talking about these are the symptoms of trauma. And these teachers started raising their hands and they said, "You're describing the kids in our classrooms. That's what they're doing." But they weren't even alive at the time of the genocide. Why would they be showing symptoms of trauma?
It's generational.
It's generational trauma. If the parents haven't recovered, if the parents are still showing the signs, what are the children learning? They're learning whatever's modeled in front of them, right? So if the parents don't know, oversimplify, if the parents are avoiding feelings, what are the kids going to learn to do? They're going to learn to avoid feelings, right? Right? So it was lived out. They didn't have any idea that we were going to talk about secondary trauma or generational trauma. They just brought it up out of their own experience. Why are the kids doing this? They weren't even alive. And so really what's happening in Rwanda right now is a whole new generation is growing up of trauma survivors. And they're getting triggered because there's the well-meaning intention. The president has not asked me for my opinion, but they have, every year they have memorial days about the genocide in Rwanda, which makes sense. Like you don't forget, right? But if you haven't healed, it's just hugely triggering all over again. And it's days. It's not like this is the day that we remember. It's days. And they shut down their businesses. They shut down the schools. They're supposed to do community service. There's a lot that's really good about it if you're healthy. But if you're not healthy, it's just hugely triggering and it brings it all up again. Aha.
Your premise with the pandemic that this is a collective trauma.
Yes. Well, it's individual because we're all taking it in our own ways, and it is a collective trauma.
And we've experienced it
Collectively. I mean, it's not like it only happened in Michigan, but not the rest of the United States, right? I mean, it is worldwide. About as worldwide as anything that I could think of as an experience.
Yeah. Now I wouldn't say we're out of it yet.
No.
But as like here in Kent County, our numbers have dipped down. I think they have pretty much around West Michigan. To where people, we're gathered here in person without wearing masks tonight. And but if we were to start getting a clue about, I'm just curious really about collectively, are there behaviors that we're doing as a society that are avoiding feelings at least here in,
Oh,
it might be overgeneralizing it, but are there things that maybe we have learned as a defensive behavior against this pandemic? And there's things that it's not gonna serve us when we're done with this.
Well,
pandemic.
so I'm going to answer it in two ways, in the
Yeah.
same way that I answer trauma survivors. We're all doing this, and we're all doing it in our own unique ways.
Mhm.
So we're all doing the same thing, and we're all doing it differently. Right? So I'm sitting in the circle of the group, and I'll say, you all have attachment ambivalence. I have no question in my mind. I haven't talked to you, but I'm convinced that we all have attachment ambivalence, but how each of you is living it out can look very, very different. And so if we went around the room that way, you would all look very different. And at the same time, it's really all the same thing. Right? So attachment ambivalence, remember I had my two things, attach and detach.
Mhm.
Attachment ambivalence gets lived out in relationships. So on one extreme, it's I stay in unhealthy relationships. You know, I stay when there's domestic violence. I stay when there's harm. Okay. I don't perceive when there's threats because I need to stay attached. Or I pursue attachments in an unhealthy way. So I had a client who had what I called serial monogamy, which is that she went from relationship to relationship, but she never went to the next relation. She never left one relationship until the next one was in place. All right. She always knew who the next boyfriend was before she left this one. She didn't break up and then say, now I'm going to look for another boyfriend. She had the next boyfriend in place and then she could break up, because the idea that there could be this lag time where there was no relationship, where there was no attachment, was so threatening that she couldn't live that way. She always had to have someone in place. Now, go to the other extreme, living in relations with detachment, right? I'm not going to have any relationships. I'm just going to live by myself. I don't need anybody. I'm going to move to Montana. And if I see people once a year, that's too much. Right? No one's going to get close to me. I have 1,000 friends on Facebook, but no one knows anything about me. Right? So living in the detachment end also feels safe to people. So it can go either way. Oh, I got out of the camera. I'm back. It's like magic. He was gone and now he's back.
You were detached.
I was detached and now I'm attached again. And there's a little cord right here that keeps me attached. Yes.
Gloria shared in the chat that during the pandemic, stopped going to church, watching mass on TV. Most of us did.
Mhm.
That were Catholic, and now every Sunday find it easier to watch on TV rather than going to church.
Right. Which is just simply making a change, right? Even though it was something I did before, it might have been totally habitual, totally regular, but now I'm in a new pattern. And so the energy that it takes to shift from one pattern of behavior to another pattern of behavior, it takes a lot, folks. It takes a lot. Change doesn't come easy. Even when you're choosing it, it doesn't come easily, right? And frequently it provokes anxiety. Get out of the pandemic, but simply changing because I don't know how it's going to turn out. People have told me how it's going to turn out. I think I know what to expect. I know I am choosing to make this change, but I don't really know for sure. So change almost always is accompanied by anxiety. And simply to remember that as I go into it can help me stick with it rather than going, oh my gosh, this is making me anxious, so I better get back to the old behavior. Well, no. Change and anxiety are going to go together, and then the anxiety will decrease. Third category. Right. Cognitive distortions. Oh, we're going to have to go fast. So cognitive distortions in 12-step programs is called stinking thinking. So if you like that better, or messy thinking. But there's a simple model that really helps us to understand what's going on. There's an action or a behavior, something's going on, and we say, it makes me feel this way. And I'm going to use feeling and emotions interchangeably here. Okay? This happens, and it makes me feel this way. When you hit me in the stomach, it makes me feel angry. Okay? Cause and effect. The dilemma is, I don't think that's really true. It is the way lots of us think, the way we think it actually works, but I don't think it's true. So I come up, this group of 3 women that are sitting here in front of me, and I'm just making this up, so I'm not really saying this about you, okay? I stick out my tongue at you, right? And the person here says, that's disgusting. I came here for a professional presentation and I have to put up with some bozo who's sticking his tongue out at me. This is nuts. I shouldn't have to tolerate this. She's really angry and she's really thinking about whether she even wants to stay or she's just going to get up and walk out. The lady in the middle is saying, you know, he's kind of cute. And I think maybe he's hitting on me. So I'm gonna hang around afterwards and maybe we can go out for coffee and see where this goes, right? Okay, all right. The third lady is saying, you know, I talked to him before the group started and I know that his allergies are coming on and it makes his tongue itch. And so when my tongue itches, I scratch it and it makes me feel better. So she's feeling really bad for me because she knows I'm not feeling very well right now. Now, they all saw the same action or behavior. One is angry, one is aroused, one's feeling compassion. What's the difference?
Perception.
Yes. And I'm going to put it in the big category of thinking, which includes perceptions, interpretations, assumptions, presumptions. In trauma, it includes my survival rules. Maybe you heard of something in the past in the 70s that were called tapes, you know, what's going on in my head, right? How I regularly, so all these are forms of thinking. And what happens is the action goes through my thinking and that determines my feeling and the intensity of my feeling. The first woman interpreted my behavior as unprofessional and she gets angry. The second one interprets it as hitting on her. She gets aroused. The third one interprets it as a behavior because I'm feeling physical distress and she feels compassion. Yes. Right. And you guys are never going to know who that lady is. You see that? You see that? This is true. This isn't trauma. This is everybody. Okay. This also continues, which is we have thinking about our feelings, which then determines how we behave. So if my feeling is sadness, but my thinking is, oh, I don't like sadness because sadness makes me vulnerable and weak. Is that going to affect how I behave when I'm sad? Absolutely. Right? If I have the emotion of anger and I say to myself, oh, anger's a sin. I'm not supposed to feel angry. Is that going to determine how I behave? Right? So this is going on in us all the time. It's just flowing freely, right? Trauma comes into this because trauma happens and it's really abnormal, awful experiences. And now how I'm going to think about those. How am I going to interpret that behavior? Someone who says they love me is hurting me. It doesn't even make sense, right? How do I interpret that? And then how am I going to feel? And then what am I going to do? I've got these big, huge feelings. What am I going to do? I can't survive. I can't stay. How am I going to behave so that I can stay? Okay. So this is going on all the time. Okay. We have descriptions for some of this. Comes from childhood, 4 categories. Black and white thinking that we already talked about, right? So it's either this or it's this. That's black and white thinking, no gray. Narcissistic, which is it's all about me. We're not going to have time to talk about that, but that's a common thing in trauma. It's all my fault. The other category from childhood is magical thinking. It's illogical. It gets magic results. So here's an example of magical thinking. If I wear my special cap, my baseball team will win tonight, right? I can't change my underwear because the football team will lose if I'm not wearing my lucky underwear, right? That's magical thinking. Don't step on a crack, you'll break your mother's back. All people who do that are this way, okay? And then the last category is concrete thinking. Children are concrete thinkers. I wish I had known this when I was preaching to elementary school students, right? Because we talk in metaphors. We talk in similes. God is like this, but children are concrete thinkers. They think literally, right? So when I say to a first grader, God is light, oh, so that's God? That's concrete thinking. And there's nothing wrong with them. We don't say, oh my gosh, you better get your child to a therapist, right? That's just how children think. They're concrete thinkers. They have not learned how to do that. But when you have trauma, you get stuck in those kinds of patterns. You get stuck in black and white thinking or concrete thinking or magical thinking or whatever. And there's a whole bunch of categories that we're not going to go into, but just very quickly, catastrophizing. So that's turning a molehill into a mountain, right? Take something small and it's going to be really big. Or always attending to what's negative, right? This is the example I use for clergy. You just preached a homily. You're standing at the door at the end of Mass. 100 people walk out. 99 people say, great homily today, Father. One walks out and says, wasn't your best effort today. Which one do you think about all afternoon? That's attending to the negative, right? Paying attention to the negative, right? But think about that, not as a one-time thing, but as a regular pattern, right? Personalizing, it's all about me. Marriages is mind reading, and it comes out in two forms. Either you're supposed to know what I'm thinking, so I shouldn't have to tell you, or how dare you think you know what I'm thinking without asking me, right? So mind reading goes both ways, right? But there are patterns, right? Generalizing. I take one experience and then I make a rule out of it. The person who hurt me has red hair. All people with red hair are unsafe. That's generalizing. But I'm telling you, when you learn these categories, you'll hear them all the time. They're everywhere. In fact, even me saying everywhere is also cognitive distortion, because they're not everywhere, but they're in lots of places, right? Right? All people do this. This always happens, you know, this never happens, all that kind of stuff. So all I'm going to say in terms of the pandemic is just listen, because you'll just hear it. It's just rampant. All right. It's just, if you want to be less judgmental, because I get really judgmental in this, it's sloppy thinking. It's illogical thinking. It's messy thinking. Frequently, if you listen to it, if you just step back from it one step, you realize it doesn't really make as much sense as it first sounds like. Initially, it sounds like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then you hear it and you go, what? Okay. In spirituality, there can be cognitive distortions that are forming or influencing our beliefs. So think about theology and how nuanced it needs to be. And if we're not nuanced, if we're not careful, if we don't think about possibilities, if we aren't careful with our vocabulary, we can really end up with some really warped ideas. I'll give you an example from my own experience, all right? I'm taking my master's exam for my theology degree. It's 3 professors in the room. You have to turn in all the papers that you've written in the program, which in theory they've read, who knows whether they did or not, but they're not gonna ask you about, that's just the launching point. They really want you to do theology. So they say something like, well, in this paper on page 5, you said such and such and such. How would you apply that to this situation? Which of course isn't in the paper, right? Oh, well, I think I would do this and this and this. Okay, well, having said that, and you say this, then how would you handle that over there? Oh, well, I think I would do that. So it's an hour long, and about halfway through, I said, you know, I feel like I'm kind of digging myself into a hole here. And I said, just keep going. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Keep going. We eventually get through these questions, and they asked me some question, and this was my response. It doesn't matter what the community believes. It only matters what the individual believes. Now, hear the black and whiteness of that, first of all, right? It doesn't matter what the community believes. It only matters what the individual believes. And one of the profs says, that's the most Baptist thing I've ever heard. Now, you also have to know, I'm like 6 months away from ordination at this point, right? So I put in my years, right? And I come into my exam and I say the most Baptist thing they've ever heard. This was not the high point of my academic career. He says, that's the most Baptist thing that I've ever heard. And the second one goes, oh, and our time's up. Could you step outside? So that's how I conclude my exam, right? I am just like, devastated. First, that I'm Baptist, and second of all, that I'm this close to ordination. And what if they find out at the seminary what I just said? And the third thing is I said to them, I don't even believe that. I mean, I said it. It was like it was the conclusion of where I had gone for the hour. It was the conclusion. But I got there and I said, I don't even believe that. So when they came out, so I closed the door. I step outside, I close the door, and they start laughing, which helps, right? They start laughing and they come out in like 30 seconds and say, congratulations, you passed, which was not the answer I was expecting. And I said, what? And they said, you took a position, you followed through on it, and when you reached a conclusion that you didn't agree with, you were ready to reevaluate your position. That's what a theologian does. That's what we wanted to see you do. Congratulations. Now, I just got my master's degree, right? I still wasn't happy. I went out and sat on a bench for at least an hour going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I wasn't happy at all about passing. But the point is, if you're off just a little bit, and then you're off just a little bit, I mean, if you walk a mile and you're not on the straight line, if you walk a mile and you're not on the straight line and you're just off an inch at the beginning, but you keep following that route, in a mile, you're significantly off, right? You have to keep adjusting. So our thinking is really important, and how we think affects the whole system. Now, it might not be a surprise at this point, but I'm a cognitive therapist. So this is really where I do a lot of my work, or where I'm most comfortable doing my work, is let's talk about what you're thinking, because what you're thinking is influencing the whole system, right? And if you can change your thinking or nuance your thinking, it's not always, to go from this to this, it's to go from this to this. There's truth in what you're thinking. It worked at some point, or you wouldn't have held on to that idea. Somehow it served you, but maybe now it needs to be tweaked or nuanced. You're living in different circumstances. You can do things a little bit differently. So that did not leave time for questions, did it? My summary conclusion is we are a complex system, and therefore, I really think, this is the last sentence, it's really important to do the work to strive for wholeness and holiness, because anything that we do will affect the whole system and help us positively. I'm willing to stay late. I don't know what happens with the, okay.
I would like, as long as we still have you recorded, to say something about Trauma Recovery Associates,
Okay,
because there may be people who would be interested in that program that you have developed over the years.
Okay.
And is available at various locations.
yes. So Trauma Recovery Associates is a program that we started about 20 years ago, and it's small groups of people who have childhood trauma. In our diocese, it's open to anybody who has any kind of trauma. It's not just clergy sex abuse. And we have a program that goes for 10 weeks that introduces them to concepts like you've heard. We have 12 units, so you got to hear 3 of them today. We have 12 units that talk about different ways, and then homework exercises to help them develop better skills and to make adjustments where they choose, because they're in charge of it, make adjustments where they choose. Online, what's helpful specifically for the pandemic is a program called Renew. It's online and it's free. You can go into these pieces and some more pieces, but it specifically speaks about how the pandemic is showing up with in these different categories. So the program is called Renew. It's totally in Spanish, and it's called Renovarse, which means to renew yourself. And it's at our website, www.Trauma Recovery Associates. No punctuation, Trauma Recovery Associates, not association, Trauma Recovery Associates.com. It's supposed to be changing to .org any day now, but I don't know if it does or not.
It's online.
Okay.
It is .org.
It is .org. Okay, so I can start using the new one. All right. And if you go in there, Renew will show up almost immediately. And you just click on that and you can go into that and do it for free and download it. There's also something called the Forgiveness, which we didn't get to today at all. The Forgiveness Workbook, which is about the process of interpersonal forgiveness. So when I've been hurt deeply, how do I forgive? But that's like a whole 3-hour talk all by itself. But the resources there, it's the same thing that we use in our programs, and it's available and it's free. So
And
Have
we've
at it.
dropped the link in the chat and we will
Okay.
share it with everyone in a follow-up email.
Cool.
So you'll get that.
Okay.
We do have time for one or two questions.
That's great for me. I'm fine. So,
Does anyone online have a question? Gloria's giving you applause.
oh, thank
I
you,
have-
Gloria. Here, any questions, comments, helpful, disputes, arguments?
Very helpful. I was one of the drivers of the Shire for a community in Muskegon that did the ACEs score. We did the biggest ACE study in the Muskegon Heights area.
Okay.
So they found in those ACE studies that we are the sickest in the nation. So that zone. So Esther Dyson is spearheading something called the Way to Wellville. So she's asking that area, how do you increase the disparities in the area and how do you build back wellness with that data? So the driver of illness was trauma.
Trauma.
So wouldn't it be advantageous now as all parishes, what we're seeing in the rates of addiction problems, anxiety and depression in children is now at a 50% rate high.
Mhm.
The suicide rate in our community is tripled.
Mm.
So that in itself, even mentioning it right now it's a difficult thing to talk about because that's hard.
It's impacting people everywhere. There's
Well,
no,
and
yeah,
usually they do post-pension
Yeah.
stuff now because it's just coming to.
right.
So wouldn't it be advantageous for us to start that trauma-informed communities, like on the scale, parish to parish, doing mental health 101? Do you think that's something that,
Mhm.
that you do on your work can integrate in, or like,
So
how
we-
do you see that?
We have, excuse me. We have different levels of intensity of programs. So the online program Renew is kind of like, think of that as independent study, do it on your own. Next level is healthy living skills, which is pretty much like Renew, except you do it with other people in a small group. And that's led by trained facilitators, but not necessarily mental health professionals. And then trauma recovery program, or the community program called Healing Act, that's run by mental health professionals, and it's longer and it goes deeper. So different intensities of programs. The dilemma is, of course, when you're starting to use mental health professionals and you're paying them their stipend and et cetera, it's just a much more expensive program, right? But lots and lots of good can come out of healthy living skills. In Kalamazoo, our organization was approached by the county to submit for a grant to start running pandemic healing groups in the community. So we just submitted a $2.2 million grant. That's like 4 times more than I've spent in years. It's a 4-year program, but the basic premise is let's turn ourselves into a healing community. That get the resources out there, help people to learn what we can do and do for each other and with each other, and turn this around. Because when they ask citizens, what should we spend this money on? This is the government money, that they gave to all the communities. Number 1 was mental health. So we're going to try. We've been doing it in the Catholic Church for 20 years, and 600 people is a great number of people, and it's barely scratching the surface because the actual traumatized population statistically is minimum 50% have childhood traumatic acts. They're not necessarily trauma survivors, it doesn't always develop that way. But the more common number is about 70%. 70% of the population, 70% of the people sitting in church have some kind of traumatic event in their childhood. And a significant number have not recovered from that. So there's plenty of work to do. Plenty. I'm not going to run out of a job. Not going to run out.
And then, are you saying that in the Diocese of Kalamazoo, this is in many parishes, there are groups going on?
No, so we run it as a diocese right now. So anybody from around the diocese can come into one of the groups. Diocesan-sponsored program. We have received a grant from Catholic Extension Society, so it's getting us out of Kalamazoo and around the diocese, so people don't have to drive so far, which of course is a hindrance. And Yeah, it's possible. I have met with Catholic Charities in Grand Rapids. They've talked about doing something. I don't know where they're at with it. I don't think that they kiboshed it, but I don't know where they're at with it. So you could always give them a jingle and say, hey, we just heard Father Ken Schmidt and we heard that Catholic Charities is thinking about something. I'm not trying to get money out of this. I don't get any money out of this, but see where they're at with it. You're going to close? Okay.
Thank you, Father Ken. Wonderful evening, wonderful presentation. And I would like to thank all of you online. And there were team members who helped put all of these programs together. We're so glad that the technology and Mark, the Director of Programming and Institutes here at the center, who has been facilitating the technology piece, this allows us to come together and to build community. And I really like what you were suggesting, that there may be some things that we could be doing together down the road in future. And after we go offline, maybe we could have that conversation, but anyone else could email you if they have some thoughts about how they would like to continue the conversation or possibly even some programming ideas. So thank you all and have a good evening. Take care.
Thank you.
And I pass those two books around.